Hi, a film that I caught up with quite recently that has been on my to watch list for a very long time is The Colour Purple, Steven Spielberg's adaptation of the Alice Walker novel. It's one of only two Steven Spielberg films that I haven't actually seen, the other being his 1989 film Always. And this is the story of a young woman, Celie, who is African American, growing up during the early part of the 20th century. She comes from an abusive family. Her mother has died. Her father has fathered two of her children, and at the age of 14, she is effectively sold off into marriage to a man who she refers to only as Mr., played by Danny Glover. As she gets older and is now played by Whoopi Goldberg, she gradually develops friendships with two other women to replace, in a way, that of her sister Nettie, who has been sent away by Mr. And as time passes, their relationships change and develop, and she gradually is able to establish herself as her own person. It still strikes me as strange that Steven Spielberg would be the person to direct this. It's a story about women, it's a story about the African American experience, and Steven Spielberg is neither of these things. However, in 1985, he was pretty much the closest thing you get to a sure thing, so giving him a movie to make like this would be both advantageous in commercial terms and also assist him in getting some prestige recognition. The irony is that the film was nominated for 11 Oscars, and Steven Spielberg was not one of the nominees. Um, I found the film to be somewhat melodramatic, somewhat over the top in some ways. There is a scene, for example, where one character punches the mayor in the face. A black woman, played by Oprah Winfrey, in fact, in her first film role, punches the mayor in the face and winds up spending 8 years in prison. Now, I'm prepared to take on trust that that has some kind of historical precedent or is loosely inspired by some real event, but it does still seem implausible without any kind of factual context backing it up. Other elements are either overplayed too much or downplayed too much. The film's score, for example, was the first that Steven Spielberg had for one of his films that wasn't written by John Williams. Instead, it's by producer Quincy Jones. But it still sounds very much like a standard issue John Williams score. Um, Another element is Seeley's friendship with Mister's mistress, a singer known as Shug Avery. And in the original book, it is explicitly a romantic sexual relationship, but in the film it's massively downplayed to being much more chaste. This is something that Spielberg himself has said that he regrets, but he felt that he couldn't really do it at the time. But if you're going to adapt a book that was winner of the Pulitzer Prize and a bestseller, it does seem strange that there would be elements then that you couldn't put in a movie because you would have the prestige of the book to support your argument. Um, Towards the end of the movie, it does step into gear, and I feel like it improves considerably. The idea of these women standing together against their brutal male oppressors. It is another unfortunate problem with the film that all the male characters are unequivocally bad. None of them have any good traits of any kind. Mister is in part redeemed towards the end, where he uses some of his fortune to Seeley's advantage with no apparent upside for himself, simply as an act of penance. But overall, the male characters are stereotyped at best. It's a well made film, but it's very much in the Spielberg mold. It looks beautiful and pastoral, but there's little in the way of depth to it. It's trying to tell this important story, but Spielberg is not yet at the point in his career where he can really dig into it. Most of his films that he's made as prestige productions tend to be shallow unless he has some real personal investment in them, such as with Schindler's List and Munich, which are two of his best films. Here, he's undoubtedly the wrong person to make this story. He could give it some box office potential, as I suggested, while um, it gave him some prestige. But the result doesn't really work. The film was a commercial success and it was nominated for 11 Oscars, but it didn't win a single one. Whoopi Goldberg, in her film debut, is excellent, and I feel should have probably won the Oscar for that year. The other performances are all fine. Danny Glover does what he can as Mister. It's a poorly written, rather shallow character. Um, and Margaret Avery and Oprah Winfrey are both very fine in supporting roles. Um, it's a film that is not as good as it could be, but given what I was expecting, it's better than I thought.